the polar collection of Kenn Back. I'm Adam Douglas from Peter Harrington, and this is Dominic Somerville, who catalogued this collection of 53 books, which are presented here on these three shelves. And this is the collection of Kenn Back, who was a British meteorologist with the British Antarctic Survey. In fact, he spent a record 8 winters in the Antarctic, and he was a descendant of George Back, and there are a couple of his ancestors' books here. This is Captain George Back's journal, narrative of the Arctic land expedition. So it's obviously in the family. So Dominic, as I say, you catalogued this collection. So what are the main subject areas being covered here?
So I think we begin in the 18th century with a few important accounts of voyages made mainly in the southern hemisphere, oceanic voyages. Then we go through to the 19th with some important Victorian accounts of attempts at the Northwest Passage. Then we get to the 20th century with some books from the heroic age of Antarctic exploration.
So that's Amundsen there that you've got there.
Exactly.
So these are very attractive books, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's actually a rare variant imprint. It's published in Copenhagen rather than Oslo. In fact, we've found about half a dozen copies in commerce and libraries.
Right. So the condition overall, it's not really a working library, it is a collector's library. These are in nice condition, aren't they?
Exactly, yeah. So I suppose standing at the head of the whole collection are 2 books that don't really fit into the polar rubric, but are of immense importance in the history of exploration. So here we have, first of all, so Philip Parker King's Sailing Directions for the Coasts of Eastern and Western Patagonia, published in London in 1832. Now, this is Philip Parker King's personal copy of this pilot that he compiled on the first voyage of the Adventure and the Beagle, that sailed between 1826 and 1830, after which...
So that's the voyage before Darwin.
Exactly, but he really paved the way for what came next. So you'll notice there's a tipped in bifolium here with King's annotations. It then passed to his son Arthur King, and then finally to the Australian maritime historian Jeff Ingleton. It's a very rare book in any form, really. And I think to really understand the annotations, which you'll be able to see at the beginning here.
And these are Parker King's annotations.
Parker King's annotations throughout. You can see there he's gone through and quite assiduously marked it up. So some detective work has discovered that this is the book that he was using. So it's the Sailing Directions for South America, supposedly compiled by Parker King and Robert Fitzroy, but it's more the work of just Robert Fitzroy, which he compiled on the famous second voyage of the Beagle that sailed in 1830, and on which Darwin was the most illustrious member. Now this copy, again, this is a very rare book. I think we can trace a couple of copies in libraries and commerce. This is a presentation copy from Philip Parker King to Captain John Lort Stokes in remembrance of the Adventure and the Beagle. King presented this to Stokes in 1851 in Parramatta, when Stokes was on his way back to Britain from a surveying voyage in Australia. Now, Stokes was most importantly Darwin's cabin mate on the famous second voyage, and showed Darwin really how to use all this scientific, all these observational tools that he had only really learnt about in books before. So I think moving back in time a bit, we have Dom Pernetty's very rare account of Henri de Bougainville's colonization of the Falkland Islands in the mid-18th century. That was the first settlement on those islands there. Again, it's a very rare book. The second edition is much more commonly encountered. It's published in Berlin in 1769.
It's a nice copy too.
Lovely copy in a contemporary binding, as you can see there. And it's got a lot of plates and maps throughout that are in very nice condition. It's very crisp internally indeed. Let's put those to one side. Okay, so now jumping forward to 19th century, Adam showed this book at the beginning. This is Captain George Back's account of the Arctic land expedition. This is the Back family copy. So you can see there, it's got the book plate of a descendant, Howard Chaplin Back there, who was So you can see Kenn back's bookplate there, Howard Chapter back's bookplate there. And it comes with 2 autograph letters from George Back to a chap called Richard Major, who was a map librarian at the British Museum. So George Back, in fact, first went to the Arctic with the ill-fated Captain John Franklin. Here is a presentation copy of that book, of so Franklin's narrative of a journey to the shores of the Polar Sea, London 1823. You can see there George Back's presentation inscription to a chap called William Eli Cook, who was a Navy agent in London and would have helped to finance such expeditions as that. Perhaps we should have a look at these 2 books as well. So this is James Weddell's Voyage towards the South Pole. It's considered really the starting point of any true Antarctic collection.
Yeah.
That's the first edition. Here we have the second and actually preferred edition. It has a lot of extra material. Now the very attractive thing about this copy, it has the ownership inscription there of Josiah Nisbet, Royal Navy, who was the stepson of Lord Nelson and saved his life by tying the famous tourniquet around his shattered arm.
Oh my goodness.
So
that's wonderful.
Yeah. Here's another very rare book. It's Richard King's narrative of the Arctic land expedition, in which he's highly critical of Back. Again, this isn't really a book that turns up in commerce, so it's really nice to have it in the original boards as well, with a judicious reback there. So moving forward to, I suppose, the 20th century. Here we saw them. So this is Henrik Bull's account of what is considered now the first footfall on the Antarctic continent. And this too is the presentation copy. There we go.
And again, a lovely copy. The cloth's very bright and fresh.
The copy indeed.
It's lovely.
Another expedition down south was the Swedish expedition, 1901 to 1904, led by Otto Nordenskjöld. This is one of the perhaps less known texts from that expedition, compiled by the only Argentine member who was allowed to join in return for the Argentine government providing food, provisions and the like. Published 1904 in Buenos Aires, again a very rare book. This one happens to be inscribed as well. Mi querido amigo Teodoro Giringhelli, which I understand means to my dear friend Teodoro Giringhelli.
So Dominic, you've described all these books, given full descriptions of them, which are available on request. I should add that the last thing that comes with this collection, apart from the books, is this pair of snowshoes, Kenn Back snowshoes, as used in the Antarctic, complete with the return address label to be sent back after yet another winter in the Antarctic. So full description of this collection and many other books on polar travel are available on the Peter Harrington website.